Hello, hello, and welcome to Master Wire Jewelry. Today we're going to be dealing with a little bit of a different type of wire. Today we're going to be dealing with what I know as tiger tail. Now you can get a branded tiger tail like this Flexilon. There's also Beetalon, or you can just get kind of a no-name brand. I get this stuff straight from China. It's almost as good, and it's a lot cheaper. So if you're just starting out and practicing, then this no-name brand stuff is just fine and will work for you. You do, however, need to know that there are many different thicknesses. So I've got 0.6, 0.8, there's like a 0.38 and a 0.5. So you always want to use the thickest tiger tail that you can for these projects, but you're going to be limited by the hole size in your beads. That's what's going to determine how thick of wire you can use. Now you also need to know that there are different sizes of crimping beads. Crimping beads are tiny little metal beads. And they come in kind of two standardized sizes. I prefer to use these small ones. Most of the time they work. The only time I need to use like a slightly bigger, I have these crimping tubes. They also make bigger sizes of crimping beads that aren't as long as these tubes. But know that if you go to a bigger size crimping bead, you also need the matching tool for the bigger crimping beads. If you use these bigger crimps in a small crimping tool, you're going to run into problems. So if you're having problems with this, it might not even just be you. It might just be that you have the wrong materials for the size of crimps, for the size crimping beads. So those all need to match up. But I want to get to the project today. So today I'm going to make this beautiful graduated garnet necklace, and I've already got all of my beads strung onto my tiger tail. And just so you know, this end is still attached to the spool. Okay, so it's kind of a mess over here, so I'm not going to show you that. But I've just strung all of my beads right onto my spool. So from here, I've got a very unique system that I didn't learn anywhere online. This is just from many years of experience of doing this. My system uses 2 crimping beads every single time. One is enough to hold, but the thing about using this tiger tail is that you've always got this pokey end sticking out, and if you can't fit it into your bead, and even that isn't the best solution because then it can come out of your bead, and anyway, this can be a really scratchy, pokey bit if you don't know how to deal with it properly. So I'm going to show you how I have come up with a solution to that. So I have put 2 crimping beads on. I've put my clasp on. Whatever clasp you have is fine. I like these lobster claw clasps, but if you have something different, that is totally okay. So now you can see I'm just going through it's actually the second crimping bead that I added. But it's kind of the first one that you meet as you go back. So that's what I've got. At this point, these naturally want to cross inside your crimping bead. You don't want to let that happen. I want to talk for a minute about our crimping tool because we actually have 2 little spots in here. We've got one that's kind of a half moon shape, and we've got one that's kind of a circle shape. And so we're going to use this half moon shape one first. And when we use it, we want one of our wires to be on one side and one of our wires to be on the other side. And we do not want those wires crossing inside of our crimping bead, because our crimp isn't going to be able to work properly and hold properly. So let me show you what this actually looks like in real life. This naturally wants to cross inside of that crimping bead. That's 100% normal, just the nature of this little loop. You don't want to make this loop so tight that this is like tight and doesn't move and hang properly. You do want a little bit of a loop here on this side of your crimping bead, but you kind of want to pull it up so your loop isn't huge. At this point, I kind of get a really good grip of my 2 tails, and then I untwist those wires. So now my wires are kind of coming this way, and they're kind of separated on either side. So if I let go with this hand, this is gripping pretty tightly. If I let go, it just twists again. And so I have to untwist it and really hold that tight so it doesn't twist again. So now I'm going to use this half moon shaped one, but I'm going to start with this side of it where I have the half circle, and I'm going to cradle that crimping bead in the center of that half circle. So you don't want it too far forward, you don't want it too far back, you kind of want it centered this way. It doesn't matter if it's on the edge this way or this way, but you want it centered so it's cradled in that half moon. And now I'm just going to come down on it really, really, really tightly. And I'm going to give this a really good squeeze. You could hear my fingers actually crack and pop there. So I've done one crimp. That's my very first crimp. Before I do anything else, I am going to pull on both of my tails and make sure that that crimp is holding. This one first crimp should be enough to actually tie the knot and do the holding here. So if any of these are still sliding, if you pull on this and something's sliding in here, separate your tails again, come in exactly the same position with exactly the same thing, and crimp it again, and crimp it tighter. And keep doing that until this no longer slides. Okay, so you can't proceed to the next step if either of these are sliding in that crimp. Once that crimp is secure though, once it's good, I actually come in here with my cutters. Here's my cutters, and I am going to nip off this tail so it is just a tiny bit shorter than my next crimping bead. From here, remember we have this extra crimping bead, slide this over, and I'm going to slide this over the tail. Now if you can see the end of your tail sticking out, come in and snip it just a little bit shorter. You shouldn't be able to see your tail sticking out of that second crimping bead. So I'm going to bring my crimping pliers back in, and I'm going to do that same first crimp, and I'm going to do it in the same way where I cradle it in this half round side, and then I bring this like alligator teeth side down into it, and I'm going to orient it exactly the same as my other crimp bead. I've made sure that that crimp is over top of that tail. I'm cradling it in, and I'm coming down, and I'm just going to crimp it. Again, I'm giving it a really good firm grip. At this point, everything should be still not sliding. There shouldn't be any pokey tail poking out from under here, but we've still got our crimping beads in this kind of half moon shape, so we need to come in. So now this second crimp, we do use this more round second little hole, but you have to know, so right now I've got my half moon shape kind of coming this way, and because of the nature of my pliers, my plier jaws, they don't come straight down together with the force like this. They actually come like this with the force because they're pivoting around this eye here. So you have to understand that these jaws don't press straight down. They actually press in kind of in this direction. So if I put my crimping bead in here and it's positioned like this, well, you can see that these forces are kind of going to fight with this and fight with this, and it might fold in half like you want, but it's going to be fighting with each other. Whereas, ignore this, if I put my crimping bead in this direction, because it's kind of in this half moon shape, well, now the forces pushing here and here are going to naturally fold that in half a lot easier. So let me see if I can show you this. It's a lot harder to show you this. Get that out of the way so this will focus in real life because it's so much smaller. So if I do this and I bring it in here, I'm going to be fighting with my angles and my direction. So I actually want to make sure I position these with kind of the cave of that half moon sticking out off the end of my pliers. I'm going to come in just like this. Can I see what I'm doing here? And I'm just going to squish both of these at once. Burp. Right there, right there. Oops, I'm fighting with my lobster claw. When you're done, you should have nicely folded in half crimp beads with no sharp edges or corners. Sometimes you got to come in and do that again. There you go. That looks pretty good to me. And I can run my fingers over it, and it's pretty smooth. You can see right here I've got my two folds, and on the outside, the rest of the way around, these just look like beads. They're a little bit mangled, but they're okay, and they're going to hold. So I want to just do the other side for you real quick so you can see how I do that. The reason I leave all these beads right on the spool is because this is how I use the least amount of extra waste. Because when you start buying really good quality of this stuff, like you can get some of this Beadalon or Flexalon stuff with like 49 strands. Here it is, 49 strands, and this stuff starts to get kind of expensive. You can also buy it with 19 strands or 7 strands, and these ones get much, much cheaper. As soon as you get these 49 strands, the price point of this goes up quite a bit per foot, so you really don't want to waste it if you can help it. So, all right, I've slid all my beads back down to the end that I've finished. I'm making sure I don't have any more on my string. So at this point, you always need a little bit of slack in your necklace so that it'll move properly. How much slack you need is going to depend on the shape of your beads. When your beads have flat sides, you need more slack. When you have nice round beads like this, you need a little less slack. But still, how much is the right amount for your beads? This is what I do. I make my necklace go around twice, and that is going to be the right amount of slack. I'm going to give myself about an inch of wire here to work with so that I don't go crazy. You might want an inch and a half. That's more like an inch and a half of wire so that I don't go crazy. So let me see. I need 2 more crimping beads. Here's one random one kicking around. I'm going to add that. I need 1 more here. And now whatever clasp you have for this other side, for me, I'm just going to use this little piece of extender chain, and I'm going to link into the very last link here. All right, let's get that out of the way. Now, again, this is very similar to the last one. I just want to show you the subtleties of getting the right slack into your necklace so that it hangs properly. All right, so I'm just going back through that very first crimping bead. It does want to just twist inside that crimping bead. Totally normal. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do my slack. So I'm going to make this go around twice. Burr, burr, burr. And that is going to just naturally push these beads down my string so it's the right amount of slack. From here, I kind of make the right size loop I want on this side of my crimping beads. Sometimes you got to help it slide. There, that's about right. You still want a big enough loop that you can get the thickness of your crimping pliers in there. If you have really thick crimping pliers, the second side is going to give you some grief. So now that I have the right slack, my crimping beads are in the right place, this is kind of tightened, which makes them cross, which actually kind of binds the thread in the crimping beads so that it's not going to move around too much. At this point, I actually straighten out my necklace and I'll usually just hang it. But now I have, this crimping bead hasn't moved, but now I've got a little bit of slack here, and I know it's exactly the right amount of slack because I can make my necklace twice. So at this point, I am ready to do my crimps. So I'm going to try and uncross that and hold it very securely so that that twist stays out. And it's a bit of a fight. So now I'm going to cradle that first bead into the half round size. That's kind of trying to twist. I'm going to untwist it again. I started my crimp, but I didn't do a tight crimp, so it's not actually holding. Trying not to get that chain caught in my pliers. And once everything's perfectly lined up, sometimes you just have to take that moment, whether it's in camera or not, and do your crimp. So let's see what that looks like. Dun, da, da, da. At this point, I want you to stop and I want you to test. Pull on this. If either side of this slides in that crimping bead, stop right now, bring your crimping pliers back in the same position and crimp that first one, just this one again, until it holds. If you're still new to this and this crimping bead gets totally mangled, then you need to stop. You need to bring your cutters in, and what I would do is I would actually bring my cutters in, cut that crimping bead in half, and then kind of meticulously pry it open and try and get it off of here without damaging my string. If you damage your string, you're going to have to restring all of these beads and start over and redo that first one and basically start over. So, but I have found that if you're very careful and if you can get that mangled crimping bead off right now, before, without harming or damaging your tiger tail here, then you can take this off, put a new crimping bead on, and start just this side over again. So that's about as forgiving as I can make this side, okay? But I'm okay with that. I didn't mangle my crimping bead, so I am going to just proceed. At this point, it's same as the last side. I am going to cut off my tail, making sure to only cut the tail that I want. And I'm going to cut it off so it is just shorter than my next crimping bead. Dun, da, da, da. That takes practice. First few times I did this, I cut it way too long and way too short. That's pretty normal. I've had some practice getting just the right length. So now I can actually almost tell it sticking out of there, but I'm not going to be able to feel that. That's going to be okay. So with that little bit of slack that we made in here, it's really important because that gives you the space you need to work to get that crimping bead over top of that tail. So let me do the same first crimp. So it's this half moon crimp, cradling it in just the half round side, and I'm bringing the like teeth side down into it, and I'm actually matching the same profile of that first crimping bead. So now I don't have any sharp tail, I don't have any scratchy bits. I'm going to make sure I bring this in the correct way for my second crimp, and I usually do both of these at the same time. I don't know, that's hard to see, I know. And I'm just going to crimp that together, and I'm going to go over the second one to make sure that there's no like corners sticking out. Run your fingers over it, make sure you don't have any sharp edges. Dun, da, da, da. That's done. The only other thing that I didn't mention, if you're using cheaper clasps, this is sterling silver, so I didn't check it, but when I do use cheaper clasps, I always check the clasp for functionality before I attach it rather than after. There's nothing worse than finishing your necklace thinking you're done and then going to put it on and finding that, oh, I got a cheap crappy clasp. That doesn't work, and then you have to start over. So always a good idea to double check the functionality of your clasps before you start. I hope that helps. This is the best way I have found of doing these crimping beads. If you're ever curious, I do have some master wire jewelry courses where we do more in-depth wire weaving. You can go to masterwirejewelry.com and find me there. Thanks for watching today, guys. Have a great day. Bye.